It was a cold day on the banks of the Hudson River in October 1990. A family with a young child thought a fun activity would be to take a helicopter ride along the Hudson River and take an aerial perspective. All of a sudden, the young child pointed out of the window and yelled, "Look, Mommy, mountains!" The family peered out of the window and saw a bunch of small knoll-looking mountains. The father, being an archaeologist, thought better. This was the discovery of York. After dating the animal bones found in the same strata as pottery and other goods, it was determined the site lasted from about AD 900 to 1100. It was very short-lived, which made sense because of the harsh New York climate. It's evident that the Hudson was a simple pit stop for the Yorkians. Their main sources of food included game, mussels, and fish. They traded up and down the river. Evidence of boat-like structures has been obtained near the site. The goods found at the largest mound indicate that there was a definite social strata. Smaller, less innate goods were found toward the bottom of the mound, while at the top, spiritual symbols, deity figurines, and other precious metals and rocks were found, along with deer bones. The location of the site rested right on the coast of the Hudson River. It is in current-day Croton Point Park. This park is very hilly, so it is evident why the site's discovery wasn't until 1990. The location is essential due to its climate and river base. The river provided clay that was used for pottery and shelter. It also provided a source of food, including fish, clams, and mussels, and a trading route. The location is also what led to the demise of the site. The climate was unsustainable, and most of their food sources went away come winter. The Hudson River froze over, and the larger game went into hibernation, and the smaller game was simply too camouflaged, cunning, and small to capture for food.
The people of York are a prime example of the beginnings of full-fledged societies during the Mississippian time period. Complex chiefdom played a huge part in most of the decision-making for York. Based on the burial mound found on site, we could tell who the head chief was. He was buried at the top of the mound with the most extravagant grave goods. There were several other burial sites found at the top of the mound along with the chief. However, these graves were not as extravagant as his. We believe that these people worked closely with the chief since they were buried higher on the mound than the rest of York's people. As for the people who were considered to be on a lower level of York's social strata, they were responsible for doing most of the manual labor. Since trade was such a prominent aspect of their everyday life, many men were responsible for growing crops, mostly corn. We could tell that physical labor was a part of the males' everyday lives from studying their remains. There was evidence on the bones of breaks and contusions, which points towards accidents and a lot of hard work. On the other hand, women in this society were treated very differently. They were responsible for the stereotypical womanly duties, such as making pottery, preparing the food the men grew, having children and taking care of them, and other domestic tasks, such as these. Evidence for this was relayed to us mostly through artifacts. For example, we found many figurines that were carved into the shape of pregnant women. Their bodily remains also showed that most women went through multiple childbirths, and they breastfed for the first few years of the child's lives.
Arts, pottery, and otherwise, the remnant artifacts of the York culture. Exemplary of mid-Mississippian cultures, the artifacts found at the York site give the discerning archaeologist an excellent account of the day-to-day lives of its inhabitants. Being one of the northernmost sites in the time period ever discovered, we are given an opportunity to paint the upper edges of the canvas of the Mississippian era. The systematized excavation of clay deposits near the riverbank tell us how much the society depended on clay tools. It's likely that several generations utilized the same deposits. The amount of pottery fragments, supplemented by complete fired clay artifacts, corroborate the idea of their dependence on the material. Residue analysis of fragments suggests that pottery was used for everything from constructing dwellings and storing foods to cooking and preparing foodstuffs. Dozens of sinker stones found in the same stratigraphic layer suggest that the society was heavily reliant on fish from the nearby river. A significant portion of their caloric intake likely came from this source. Game in the immediate area was much sparser than it was in the more southern sites of their contemporaries. The non-utilitarian artifacts found in proximity to the largest mound allow for the arguments of a partially stratified society. Small stones with geometric carvings thought to be astronomical in nature. Occasional non-endemic stones and shell fragments prove some level of connection to other sites. Whether or not there were sustained trade routes between York and other downriver sites is unable to be either proven or disproven due to the lack of materials found.
This site consists of 4 major earth mounds that correspond to the 4 cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. These 4 mounds were rectangular with flat tops. The north mound was found to have artifacts and post holes pertaining to an elite group of individuals. The east and west mounds were found to have more religious artifacts. Speculation is that they were used for religious activities and were based on the sunrise and set. The south mound was only partially finished and no artifacts were found on it. Between the mounds, post holes and markings were found that show a defensive barrier made of wooden posts. The houses were located in a half circle facing the north mound. The Hudson River was to the east of the settlement, and a trash pit was found near it containing shells and fish bones. The soil tests show that the inhabitants of this settlement maintained large gardens which correspond with other settlements from this period.
The demise of the York site and its people was nothing drastic or horrific, as was the case with many of the sites during the Mississippian period. We can assume that many of the people either moved to another location or divided up into smaller groups. Since the people of York were located in New York, they were not highly affected by the new European diseases as the sites of other states such as Georgia were. A logical theory would be that the people of York decided that they had a better chance of survival in a different location or in smaller groups. Since they were located along the Hudson River in New York, they may have experienced harsh winters that could have affected their crops and resources. We can assume that because of these harsh winters, the people of York may have decided to move further south in hopes of a more moderate climate and a more successful cropping season.